with you about building the day-to-day that's right for you. And I really want to emphasize the second half about it being right for you. I'm a medical doctor who's been teaching at Stanford since 2009, and I teach courses on child health and child nutrition. And every year I have a group of super bright Stanford students, mostly women, who come to me in my office hours, and they look at me and they say, how am I going to do it? I know that I want to have a family. I know that that family is going to be really important to me, and yet I know that I want to have a really meaningful career, and I don't know how I'm going to balance those two things. So do you have a trick? Is there some kind of a solution that I can start preparing for when I have these two competing roles? And then they ask me this question. They say, how am I going to achieve work-life balance? And I look at them, and I really feel for them, because I remember being in exactly that situation, and I think the simple answer is that there is no simple answer to that question. And also, I think the simple answer may also be that it's not about necessarily establishing work-life balance as much as it's about identifying your passions and trying to build them into all of the things you do. When you're at work, if you're at work, when you're at home with a family, if you have a family. And that is much more important, and is going to lead you to a greater amount of happiness in your life than if you focus on how much time am I investing in my work versus my career, and you try and artificially separate those two things. Now, this is something that I am still working on every single day of my life. It is a work in progress. It's not something that I've just figured out, and that's why I'm here talking to you about this. So I'm going to tell you how I got to where I am, and I think stories are the best way to sometimes convey ideas. So I'm going to start with a story. And yes, we are at a Women's Leadership Conference, but I'm going to start with this slide. Some of you in the room may know what this picture represents. This was the wedding of Princess Diana to Prince Charles in 1981, I think. I was 7 years old when this wedding took place, and I remember my mother let me stay up the whole night to watch this. It was like, I don't know, the roof had blown off of our house or something. It was something fundamentally changed on this night, and the whole world stayed up to see this real-life fairy tale. This, normal, everyday woman had been selected, had been kind of swept off her feet. And I remember as a 7-year-old thinking, wow, that could happen to me someday. And I don't think I was necessarily aiming for the princess part of it, but I've had somewhere inside of me the feeling that something amazing could happen in my life. And yet, when I looked at her, I didn't want to be her. And I think that's an important distinction, because often we see people living a dream, and it's difficult sometimes to decide, are we going to envy that person, or are we going to be inspired by that person and say, I can do this. I'm going to start picturing myself doing something amazing, like what this person is doing. And I think that if we focus on, rather than, let's say, envy, if we focus on inspiration, we create the space to make dreams come true in our lives. Another thing I remember from this incredible event at the age of 7 is that I remember asking my mother, and my parents are both academics, so they always wanted me to aspire to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, some acceptable profession for two academic parents. And they had a 7-year-old who was mesmerized by this princess going up the stairs with her long train, trailing behind her. And I remember saying to my mother, why do I have to choose just one thing? When they ask me what do you want to be when you grow up, why do I have to say, I want to be this, and then stop there? Why can't I say, I want to be a princess, and I want to be a horse, and I want to be a doctor? Like all the things that you want to be at the age of 7, why could I not have all of those things? It seemed so unfair to me that I had to choose just one. So then, I turned 8, and it sounds like my parents let me watch a lot of television, but actually I had 1 hour a day and I just made the most of that 1 hour. When I was 8, I saw a TV show called Fame, that again, some of you may remember. It was about the School of the Arts in New York City, and there were dancers at the school. And I remember seeing those dancers and thinking, with all my 8-year-old, every fiber of my 8-year-old body said, I want to be a dancer, I must dance. And there was this scene with this ballet mistress, and she had a stick, and she would stamp the stick on the floor, and she would say, you want fame? Well, fame costs, and right here is where you start paying. And I used to think, I'll pay. And that was so attractive to me, that idea of working hard for something amazing and having it come true, that I remember saying to my parents, please, let me dance. And of course, academic parents, again, not on the top of the list of chosen professions, but they said, we'll let you do this as a hobby, as long as you get straight A's in school, as long as you... I suffered through 7 years of violin lessons in order to continue dancing. I did everything they wanted as long as I could continue dancing. And then I turned 17, it was my last year of high school, and I started pretending to fill out my university application forms, and I secretly sent off some of those big VHS videotapes that we had in those days, and I sent them off to Paris and Germany, and there was the London school. Every school that I had heard of that trained professional dancers, boot camp for ballet dancers, I sent them a VHS video, and I left it at that. And then, one night at 2 in the morning, because I guess the German secretary at the academy had forgotten about the time difference, she called my father on the phone at 2 in the morning and said, your daughter has been accepted, she can start in August. And I think my father was either still half asleep and thought he was having a nightmare, or he just was kind enough to wait until the next day to come and wring my neck. But basically, after many, many shouting matches and me saying to them, this will be a great experience. I'll learn a new language. I'll learn a new culture. I'll take correspondence courses through the university while I'm abroad, but please let me have this year. And after all of those shouting matches, I ended up in boot camp. And I'll tell you, it really was boot camp. I have friends who've grown up in countries where Army service is mandatory for men and women, and they tell me it was really tough, but it was a coming of age for them. And I think to myself, you didn't go to the ballet school that I went to, because boy, was that a boot camp. I had a Romanian battle axe of a ballet mistress. She made the woman in Fame look like a fairy godmother. She shouted at us in 3 different languages. I remember being told in German, and I didn't understand German, but I learned fast, but she used to shout at us, was ist das für ein Salat? Which means, what kind of a salad is this that you're dancing? And then in Italian, I don't know how she spoke Italian, she used to say, I capisci un tubo, which means you've understood nothing. After 2 years of working with this woman every day of my life, she gave me, I think, what was a big compliment coming from her. She said to me in German, which I then understood, she said, the best reward for a teacher is to make something out of nothing. And I thought, wow. I think that was a compliment. But what I learned in this time was I learned that sometimes when you fought really hard for something, it ends up not being exactly what you expected, and you kind of have to make a decision. Either you're going to stick it through and make it into something you enjoy, or you're going to decide otherwise. But at the time, I had fought so hard to get there, I couldn't even call my parents to complain because, it had been my decision. So the one part of the deal that I didn't keep with them was the thing about it being 1 year. It ended up being 10 years that I danced in Germany. And it took me the full 10 years to realize one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, and one of the most frustrating lessons that I've learned, and that's that your parents are usually right. At least mine were. And really, it took me 10 years, but I realized in those 10 years that while I had had this dream come true, that there was a ceiling to that dream. And I started after 10 years to feel myself bumping up against that ceiling. I knew that I would never be the prima ballerina. I would be maybe a good soloist that would dance for maybe 15 years before my career ended, maybe with an injury. And I kind of knew that I had more in me and that I wanted to do something else meaningful with my life. Now that I didn't listen to my parents, I'm getting that all back from my 3 boys. This is my 2-year-old telling me he can use his imagination to see where he's going. And he, of course, fell down 3 steps, with that bag on his head, and was howling and had a big egg on his head. But he said to me afterwards, "You know what? You were right." And I thought, oh boy, I am like getting this all back right now. It's all coming back to me. So it took me those 10 years to realize my parents were right, but change has never been easy for me. And I've never wanted to give up something for something that I perceived to be less valuable or less enjoyable. So here I was in Dresden, in the former East Germany. I remember there was a big event one day. It was called the International University Day. And there was a stand set up with a person from Stanford there. They were handing out brochures. In those days, nobody was on the web yet. I mean, East Germany, like having more than one flavor of yogurt, that was considered high-tech at the time. So I read through this brochure, and I kind of looked at the palm trees and the sandstone buildings, and I thought, wow, now that would be something that would be like a change in the right direction in my mind. But I thought, I've been out of school for 10 years. I have been a dancer. I haven't been like inventing the next generation of the iPad. I've been dancing, and I'm going to send them an application, and I have to go to Berlin and write the SATs, which was another nightmare. Let me tell you, everybody prepares for SATs here, and they go in prepared. I went into those SATs and read the instructions. Fill in the bubble completely with a number 2 pencil. So I spent 15 minutes reading all the instructions about how I was supposed to completely erase my answer if I changed my mind. And obviously the scores were not great, which was another reason that I thought, there is no way that I would get into a school like this. And I told one of my friends, I'm not going to do it. There's no way, it's ridiculous. And she said to me, you can't win the raffle if you don't put your name in the hat. She said, send in an application. What are you afraid of? So what? So they're going to say, you didn't get in? You've been told before in the world of dance you didn't get a part that you wanted, or you didn't get into the company that you were auditioning for. It's not going to hurt you. So put your name in the hat. So I did. I filled out an application by hand in those days, wrote my statement by hand with white out whenever I made a mistake, and then I sent out an application. And a few months later, something quite amazing happened. I got delivered to my dressing room a big envelope from Stanford University. Do you guys remember that big envelope? Now, I've asked my students this, and they tell me these days they hear first by email that they got accepted, and then they get the envelope. That is tragic in my mind. That's like somebody delivering a marriage proposal by email. Will you marry me? Send. The ring will be delivered next week. The whole magic is gone of that moment with that envelope where you think, could it really be? And I remember opening that envelope before I went on stage, and it said, you've been accepted to Stanford University. And I remember thinking, I am terrified and I am exhilarated at the same time. And I was exhilarated because I knew I had a chance to do something even greater with my life. And I was terrified because I knew how much hard work it was going to be to go back to school and be a freshman at the age of 27. But that taught me another lesson in my life that I've taken with me, and that's that anything in life that's going to be valuable, that's going to bring you further in life, is going to require a hell of a lot of effort. Things that come easily, they don't bring you anywhere. They don't make you grow. It's the things that you fight for that really add value to your life at the end of the day. For me, getting into the world of professional ballet was really hard work. Going back to school at the age of 27 and then after that going to medical school at the age of 30 was hard work. But by far, for me, the biggest challenge, the most exhilarating and terrifying challenge of my life, and it's an ongoing one, is the raising of these 3 young people. They say that good things come in small packages. And I have to say that when somebody hands you a piece of yourself that is no longer attached to you and gives it to you, and that thing comes with absolutely no instructions, and they're going to let you take him home with you, it is a tremendous responsibility. It's the feeling I got when I got that envelope, that I had a chance to really do this really well, but that it was going to be a hell of a lot of work. And it was invigorating. It changed everything for me. For the first time, I wasn't in first place. My needs, my desires, my ambition was not the first priority in my life. I made decisions about what I wanted to do based on this piece of me that was no longer attached to me, but that I was responsible for. And I'm not saying that to be a good mother, you have to give up your career for your child, or you have to somehow compromise. I'm not saying that. I have friends who are doing this very differently. I have a friend who's a neurosurgeon, and she has 2 young children. She works long hours. She sometimes doesn't see them for 24 hours or longer if they're in bed when she comes home. But she's happy doing what she's doing. And because she's happy, she's a fantastic mother. They're proud of her. I have another friend who has a degree from Wharton, and she put everything on hold the minute the children arrived, and has not worked until now when they're leaving for college, because for her, it made her happy to see every minute of their growth and their development. Now, neither of these options would have been right for me. I needed something in between. But in the end, I think what makes you happy is going to make you into the best mother, the best family person, even if you don't have children. It's that happiness. It's finding out what's going to make you happy, that's going to make you good at what you do, both at work and at home. So for me, the perfect day is a sandwich. It starts with me cooking something for the kids. I like to cook for them in the morning. I like to pack their lunches. This sounds so I should be more emancipated. I should say I walk away from these things. This is what I love. It makes me happy. It makes me better at what I do in my career, to cook for these children. And it's out of necessity, and I'll tell you why in a few slides as well. So I start the day like this. I like taking them to school. I like walking hand in hand with them and giving them a kiss and sending them off. And then my husband and I spend 20 minutes going for coffee together, and we talk and we catch up. And for me, that is an investment in my career as well as in my home life, because it makes me better at both. So after that, I get to spend a few hours with some of the brightest students in the world, and we share ideas, we laugh, we have fun, they inspire me. I hope that I inspire them sometimes. This is the filling of my day. And because of the fact that I'm teaching on children's health and teaching on child nutrition, the passions that I get to marinate in during my workday are also the passions that I get to live in with my time with my family. So there's definitely crossover there. There's integration there of work and home life. And many of these passions grew out of the necessity that I mentioned earlier. We had an experience when our middle son was 2.5. This is my middle son. And I give this to my students as a case study. And they all want to be pediatricians when they grow up. So I tell them, tell me what you see. And inevitably the word butterball comes up. He's pink, he's happy, he's smiling, he's in a developmentally appropriate way feeding himself with a spoon. Right? Guy just looks well. He looks like a good little Good little guy. Now, I want to show you Misha, and I want you to pretend you're the pediatrician, and I bring this little boy in a year later at the age of 3.5. And this is what he looked like at 3.5. He was emaciated. He was still smiling because he's the bravest little guy I know. He had no energy. He would lie on the couch and not have the energy to get up and play with his older brother. He was absolutely unwell. He complained of tummy aches every single day. His belly was terribly swollen, but his limbs were so thin that his underpants wouldn't stay up. They would fall down whenever we put them on. So after many months of worry and stress and going to bed at night praying the child would be alive the next morning, because it seemed that just the work of breathing was all the energy he had for each day. After those months of fear, Misha was finally diagnosed with celiac disease, which is a severe autoimmune reaction to the gluten found in wheat and many other grains. And 6 months after being on a gluten-free diet, this is what Misha looked like. Okay, so in these months between the diagnosis and when he looked like this, I had some choices to make. I could either wallow in the sadness of this diagnosis, wallow in the fact that we would probably never be able to go on a family holiday to Italy like I dreamed about, because, right, pizza and pasta everywhere, what am I going to feed the child? I thought to myself, I'm going to have to quit my job and be a full-time cook in the house, because basically everything you buy in the stores or in takeaways, I had been, as a working mom, I had been getting takeaways a lot. 3-4 times a week I would get takeaways because I was tired, and they all were from places that were, full of gluten, full of traditional products that contained gluten that would make this child sick. And then I thought, wait a minute, what if we take these lemons and we make lemonade out of it? What if we make cooking into something celebratory, into something that brings us together? And I started playing around, simple stuff. I'm not a chef, I've never been to culinary school. I started playing around with roasted vegetables, seasoning chicken. We planted a little herb garden and used the chives and the basil to rub on the chicken and marinate it to make it really tasty. And you know what? I found a new hobby. I started to see how much fun it was to cook simple food from scratch. The children came into the kitchen. Every time they heard me pulling out one of those silver bowls or getting out the eggs, they would run to the kitchen and want to help or want to watch or just want to be around to smell the food that was being made in that kitchen. We had friends come over more than ever before to eat with us. They thought, there's good food at this house. So it became like a treat in some ways to have dinner parties. We celebrated way more than we had ever celebrated in the past. We learned about wine and how wine can be paired with food. And we had evenings sitting around a table with friends that went on late into the night, where we would laugh and talk and eat and drink. And it was more fun managing this child's illness than I could ever have imagined. We also sat down together at the end of the day. We sat down around a table because we had spent the time cooking the food, and we talked. The children talked. That's Misha laughing in the background. He's 6 now. And just seeing the family come together, seeing our social circle come together, really showed me that this was a very feasible thing for a working mother to do. It didn't have to be high-wire cooking from the Food Network. And I thought to myself, how can I incorporate this into my work? I wish that every person trying to raise a family in America could know how easy this can be and how rewarding, how this can add value to your life. So we made a MOOC, because online education is here, right? It may not take over what we're, our traditional academic education, which I hope it never does, but I think there are very real uses, and one of them could be in public health. We can get messages out to an amazing number of people through online learning if we make them simple, fun, and accessible. So the children helped me to put together a massive open online course called the Stanford Child Nutrition and Cooking class. And I'm going to show you the trailer quickly from that. I hope we can get the sound too, so that you can hear it, but I'm going to just...
Our children are in trouble because we've outsourced the job of feeding them. The average American diet consists of about 70% processed food. Our desire for convenience leaves us relying on strangers to produce the food we feed our families. When we cook, we get to decide what is going into our children's bodies, and unlike the processed food manufacturers, we have a strong interest in the health of the people who are going to be eating the food that we make. If we practice moderation, then no food is forbidden. When our children are drinking juice as a thirst quencher during the day, then the sugar really starts to add up. If we do the best we can with the resources that are available to us, we can begin to have more control over where our food comes from and also how it's prepared. Let's start by thinking, what am I going to serve for my vegetables for this meal? Don't start with the protein. Start by thinking, am I going to make a stir fry? Or am I going to make steamed vegetables with a white sauce on top? Or am I going to make a salad as my vegetable? And then ask yourself, what would go well with that? Could I make a quick fish in the oven? Could I make some homemade chicken nuggets on the stove for the kids tonight? When kids see adults coming together around healthy foods, they'll often be more willing to try new things. Also, let little ones mix things in a bowl or add fruit to make their own smoothie, prep vegetables or mash things like potatoes or bananas or avocados. This gives them a sense of control that can help them to be more adventurous eaters. In the long run, a diet of mostly home-cooked foods prepared by someone who cares about the people eating that food will almost always be healthier for the whole family.
So, as you can see, I was lucky in that I found a way to incorporate my passion, my newfound passion, and also something that had been a necessity for our family. And I found a way to incorporate it into my work in a way that has been so rewarding. We have a community of more than 60,000 people that are actively sending us recipes, telling us their stories about how they struggle to get their children to try vegetables or to eat anything that wasn't white. It's quite amazing to see how much you can do with a simple message that you believe in. So my challenge to you for today is to take all of the things that you love, all of your passions, your priorities, the pieces in your world that inspire you, and see if there's a way to bring them together and create your own collage of the day-to-day that is right for you. It can be hard to start. So sometimes something, if you think of it in this way, can give you a starting point. So if you're deciding on a career, you might want to ask yourself, ideally, how much time do I want to be spending in the home versus away from the home? If you may already be in a career and there may be very little flexibility there, in that case, we move on to the second layer, which is how can I incorporate my passions and my hobbies into my time at home and my time at work? How can I mix those things together, make them overlap in ways that satisfy me and that keep me happy and doing my best wherever I am in my day? And then I think the last message that I want to leave you with is that it's really critical, it's really important not to let the fear of failure prevent you from reaching for the stars. Once you've found the thing it is that you want to do, once you see something that catches your eye and you feel like, wouldn't that be great? You've got to find that door. And I'm going to quote a very wise professor called Bill Abrams, who said, once you find the door that you want to enter, and you've tried knocking, and you've rung the bell, and you've looked around and tried every key that you could possibly find, if you can't get that door open, break the damn door down. Because you should never feel too young or too inexperienced to excel at something, to exceed expectations. Your own desire, your own passion will drive that process and will allow you to get up on that stage of life and blow them away. So best of luck, and thank you very much. I better stay here near the mic. Do you have any questions for me? And if so, that would be great. I'd love to chat a bit. And then I have one little clip, since we have a bit of extra time, that I want to show you that is completely unrelated. It's a YouTube clip that I always watch when I need a little inspiration. But first, let me answer your questions if you have any. Any thoughts? Anybody know exactly what they want to do? Yes?
No. Definitely not. But you seem to have found your own work-life balance. How do you fit in like exercise and like personal well-being into that whole thing?
That's a great question. And again, for maybe a year or 2 years, I didn't exercise because I remember being so busy that, you know, I had taken on a job at Stanford. I was here most of the day, then I picked up the children. I didn't feel like I could leave them to go to the gym. It just wasn't feasible. I needed that time with them. And so there was about an 18-month period there where I just didn't exercise. And after that period, I remember feeling like, I don't feel like myself for some reason. Something's missing. So I reevaluated and I said, we need to find a way to fit this in. My husband felt the same way. So we said, well, how can we make this work? And he said to me, well, let's look at our day and see where do we have time to put this in. And I said, there is no time. The only time we have where we're not doing something that's required for either work or the family is when we watch TV in the evenings. We'd have a show that we were watching, like Homeland or The Good Wife or something, and we'd watch it. You know, it would be our time together. So he said, let's rent 2 exercise machines and put them in front of the TV. And while we're watching The Good Wife or Homeland, we will spin on those machines. What do you think? And I thought, okay, let's give it a try. And I had heard so many people saying they bought those exercise machines and they ended up being like extensions of their clothes rack, that they would just, so I thought, let's try it out first before we commit. And we got this bike and this Orbitron, and now every evening we go and we have the TV in front of the exercise machines and we exercise for half an hour, maybe 40 minutes. We do some sit-ups and that's it. So I think there are creative ways. I could never, in my day, fit in going to the gym, having to put on fancy Lululemon clothes. Like, I couldn't do that. But the way it is now, I can actually, just in the clothes that I cook dinner in, which is like a t-shirt and shorts, I can get on the Orbitron, nobody's going to watch me, and I can do my exercise. So I think it's about fitting it in, examining where there might be places where you can either multitask or squeeze in a little extra something and take away from something else. But good question. Yeah. Other thoughts? Yes.
I have a question about cooking, and I love to cook, but most of what I know takes much longer and is more of like a big deal. How do you dive into learning the sort of everyday how to cook and how much time you spend, or how to figure out some of those really great skills that's more like family and feeding?
Yes, and you know, exactly what you're saying is the reason why we put together this massive open online course, because I had so many parents saying to me, I don't have time. I don't have time to read a recipe and go shop for the 12 ingredients in the recipe and then measure them out, and who's going to wash all the measuring cups. I mean, that would be a deal breaker for me if I had to cook that way. So what I think is the answer, and the way that I do it, is that I don't use recipes. I cook with principles, simple principles. For example, if you want to cook vegetables, get a pot. Have some olive oil in your house and have some onions and garlic in your house at all times. and then start almost every vegetable, except the fresh ones for like salads. You wouldn't want to, cook those. And chop up some onions and some garlic and saute it in a little bit of olive oil. You can basically add any vegetable you have in your fridge on top of that. If you want to go French that night, put some thyme on top and some salted and a bit of lemon juice. If you want to go Asian stir fry that night, drizzle some plum sauce and some soy sauce on there. We have to use tamari because soy sauce is a hidden source of gluten. Did you know? I didn't, but now I do. Anyway, so there are ways in which you can totally simplify one-pot meals that are tasty and satisfying and don't require a recipe or a measuring cup. Even baking, like pancakes. I made pancakes this morning, and I took a blender. I threw in there a banana, a couple of eggs, some milk, a touch of walnut oil so it wasn't too dry on the tongue, and a bit of gluten-free flour mix. And I blended it in the blender and poured it on the skillet. There was no measuring, and there was only one blender and one pan to wash up. And the children looked at me like I was a goddess. And I thought, this is so great. I wish I could show people how easy this is. So, I'm not trying to sell anything, but there are free, open online videos of how to make cooking really simple. And I'll give you the website. And you can go and log on and watch them for free anytime if you feel like you want to.
Add a little fat-free cottage cheese and some ground-up flaxseed to your pancakes.
Oh, how nice.
Extra
Fiber and
protein and some omegas for yourself.
Excellent. I love it. You
Then
see,
I don't have to add the oil.
that's great.
Yeah, really
These are the tips that I love hearing from the community
Well,
that
that's
we generated.
Not having the intergenerational thing, the marketing from, big food, that, big kids won't eat healthy food.
Yeah,
Vegetables are yucky, hamburgers are good.
yeah.
We've all been brought up to believe those things, and how do you deal with that in your profession? And do you come across that in what you do professionally?
Yes,
That
I do.
attitude?
Yes, and in fact, I really think that in many ways the processed food industry has done a lot of damage to our relationship with food. We used to have an intimate relationship with food. We used to love our food and know where it came from and cook it on most nights. And the processed food industry, it was like we suddenly outsourced the intimacy with our food. We paid a cast of strangers to strip our food, pump it up with synthetic vitamins and nutrients, package it in bright, colorful packaging, sometimes in the case of like chickens, cage it and drug it and pump it full of hormones until its breasts got so big it couldn't walk to the water trough, And we did this so that we would have more time to spend on other things. But what's happened is that all that time we saved, we're now investing in this battle with food. I saw a TV commercial the other day for an antacid, and it was this woman at a birthday party. You might have seen this commercial, and she's at a birthday party, and she takes a hamburger. She's like, I'm identifying with this woman. I'm at these birthday parties all the time. And she goes to eat her hamburger, and the hamburger bites her back. It starts eating her face. And the byline is, when your favorite foods start to fight you, fight back fast with the antacid. And I thought, wow, this is a statement on our relationship with food. I have been taught in medical school that pain is a protective sensation, and when something is causing you pain, it means bodily damage is coming next, and you should probably avoid that thing. But now we are being told to medicate the pain away so we can continue eating the food that's hurting us. And I think that's a sad state of affairs. But I think that we can rebuild that relationship, especially if we start at a young age with our children, to show them that, artichokes can be a celebration food. There are baby artichokes at the farmer's market for a certain number of months, and the children can get excited if they see us getting excited about it. So it's all about the modeling and the intergenerational passing the right message and the right habits onto our children. I completely agree.
That buying a, $4 basket of raspberries in season, organic,
Yeah,
is just as much of a treat as buying a package of Oreos.
absolutely.
You're spending the same amount of money, why not buy it with the raspberries?
Yeah,
And the raspberries can be just as much of a treat
yeah.
as the junk food.
Yeah, there's also the misconception when we're talking about cost that somehow junk food is cheap cheaper, right? Because on a cost per calorie basis, junk food is cheaper. But we don't need empty calories. You know, we need nutrients, especially for our children. So if you look at nutrient density and you look at regular ingredients that are in season, you know, that are prepared simply, you come out pretty much on par, if not better, by doing simple home cooking than the, you know, big Happy Meals.
I think as women, and daughters are kind of quite often this nutrition thing, as women, you know, traditionally, and I don't know, a lot of these young women will ultimately end up being the one cooking for their families, as you have.
Yeah.
You know, how are they going to try to incorporate that as they're building their careers, as they're starting a family? Are they going to be able to, you know, not just stop and pick up the pizza or the processed food on their way home from work? Can they still try to
Yeah.
create that healthy family
Right.
dinner time that you've done? My sister works full time. She has 2 sons. They eat organic homemade food every night.
That's great.
And
Congratulations. You know, I think it can be done. I don't think you guys need to aim for perfection. I know you're already high achievers, and boy, if you have a bad day and you need to go pick up the takeaways, please do it rather than having a nervous breakdown at the stove. But I think that if we ask ourselves, let me touch base with myself. I'm tired, but am I really, do you think I could just muster the strength to boil some pasta and sprinkle some cheese on top and serve it with a fresh piece of fruit that I've cut up? Because that meal that might take you 12 to 15 minutes is so much better than the Happy Meal, and so much better for your children, and will bring you together so much more than the Happy Meal eaten in the minivan on the way home. And I'm not saying that I've never done that, because I have at times been like, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown if I have to cook tonight. But I think it's about what you do most of the time, and it's about not aiming for perfection, but just seeing, you know, where it takes you if you start walking in the right direction. Yes?
Can you talk about some of the ways that you sought to preserve your relationships with when we're doing things to your valuable to your life,
Yes.
to your life, especially in the context of careers?
Yes. I think the simple answer there is food. Food brings people to you. It is amazing. Like, I went to my child's preschool, I think it was 6 months ago, and I made apple pancakes at Bing here on campus. I made apple pancakes with their class. To this day, I walk into that classroom, and little 3-year-olds run up to me and they go, "You made apple pancakes." That was 6 months ago, and you still want to come and give me a hug because I made apple pancakes? The power of food to bring people together is huge, but that's a kind of a joking answer. You do need to invest time in your relationships. And somebody said to me recently, because I was talking about this discrepancy between work-life balance and what do we call that? And this person said to me, it's all work. You have to work on your career, you have to work on your relationships at home, you have to work on your raising of your children. It's all work. It's just that some of it is unpaid work and some of it is paid work, right? So maybe if we see it as, these are our projects that we're working on. I'm working on these things at work, I'm working on these things at home, and I'm trying to insert as much time and energy as I can into each of these projects, and just check in every once in a while and ask yourself, when you're making a decision, even though, let's say I have work to do tonight, my husband really wants me to come to this business event with him, it would mean a lot to him. Maybe I should go for an 80% delivery of the talk that I'm giving the next day, and give 20% to investing in that time I need to spend with somebody that I love. So it's all about taking away and giving, and I think aiming to be real instead of being perfect. I think that's the key. Yes.
I often feel the tension of just being hyper scheduled. You know, you want to do everything that you want to do, and so from 9 to noon I'm going to do this, I'm going to do 1, got the lunch date, 1 to 5, okay, now I'm going to go work out, then I'm going to do these things from 6 to 7, and it just feels so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, I often feel the tension with wanting to have more unstructured time and just fun.
Yes.
And how do you kind of navigate that? Do you feel that tension as well?
I feel that tension every day.
And how do you do that on a daily basis? Is it?
I think for me, the only thing that keeps me waking up thinking, how lucky am I, is the fact that I have, and this is something that's very individual, if you can find things you love to insert into those chores, if you will, or tasks, if you can make them fun, then they give back to you. You give your energy and you give your effort, and they give back to you. And I think it takes some really careful soul searching to find out what it is that you can do to make that 2-hour chunk of time more enjoyable. How can you, maybe if you have to study for something, let's say, maybe you really like the mochas at Mayfield. So you are going to study those 2 hours at Mayfield with the mocha in the sun, because that makes that 2-hour chunk of hard work more enjoyable for you. So in little ways, if you can make it more fun, it just makes the sum total of all of what you do in a day seem less heavy and give back to you a little bit more. But it is hard. I don't know if I have the answer for you there. Should we take 2 more? 1 and then 2 at the back? Yeah.
We had a very unique career path, starting as a dancer and then going back to school later and getting your medical degree. So if you went back in time, like, would you do it all over again, or are there things that you would have tweaked along the way?
That's a good question. I think if I had to do it, look, I am where I am today because I made the choices that I did. So I wouldn't change anything because I'm very happy where I am today. But if I had to advise somebody, as I do with students, I would say, gap year between undergrad and medical school, good idea. Gap decade, not such a good idea, because it just happens that you will end up then in medical school with your biological clock ticking like this, and you will want to start having babies while you're studying, which is really hard. I did it. I had 2 babies in medical school, and let me just say that is something I could never do again. I survived it once, but it's one of those things I look back and I think, if you said to me, oh, you just have to do that again, I would just lie down and cry, because I remember carrying a breast pump to the medical school, and they didn't have pumping rooms in those days, and I would go into the bathroom and plug it in and like pump and think, God, if somebody walks in there, it was just a mess, So I think there are things you can do once in your life that you'll look back and think, I don't know how I did that, but I would definitely say, try as young women who want careers, try and get the hard part done as much as is feasible without waiting till you're, do you guys know who Carl Gerasi is his name? I think his name is called that. He's the inventor of the birth control pill. And he was a Stanford faculty person. He's emeritus now. He came and spoke with the Humbayo class when I was in the Corps. And he said to us, you women are all going to want careers. So what you should do is, at this young age, harvest a dozen of your eggs and freeze them so that you can all undergo IVF when you're 45 and you have your PhD and your house and you're all ready. And I kind of thought, I'm not sure that sounds right. Something doesn't sound right there. And so I would say, we do have, as women, we have certain phases in our lives when we want to be starting a family, if we plan to have a family. And so I think getting the really hard stuff done before that phase makes it easier. It doesn't mean it's a deal breaker if you change jobs and you're retraining and you want to have a family. I don't think there's ever a time in your life where you sit down and say, there's nothing going on. I think it's time to have a baby. It doesn't happen. You just do it and you fit it all in somehow, right? Did you have a last question?
So from becoming a professional dancer to going to science and then into medicine, what was the decision to kind of help you, you wanted to go into the career path that you are now, since it's such an opposite field of profession?
You'd be surprised, because while I was dancing, I kept that promise to my parents about taking correspondence courses, and of course I'm working with my body every day as a dancer, right? So I was thinking, okay, I'll learn about anatomy. Wouldn't it be interesting to know, how does this hip joint work if you're trying to lift your leg up to the side and bend your arm back there? How far is the back meant to bend backwards before it breaks? Stuff like that, So I took anatomy classes while I was dancing by correspondence, and I remember thinking, this is fascinating, because now I'm understanding what's going on when I do a certain move or when I hold a certain balance. there's a lot of physics and physiology and anatomy in dance. And so for me, that was a natural area of interest. And then there was also the fact that I saw a lot of dancers getting injured, and I saw sports medicine as a potentially interesting field when I first came here. And again, that was me taking what I was doing and building it into what I wanted to do professionally. And then I had children, and then my focus shifted towards children's health. So I think also maybe having the flexibility to say, my interests are changing. I never signed a document saying I will never, veer off of this path. You can veer off all the time, and it doesn't mean you have to turn around and go back. You just change and forge a new path in a new direction and take with you everything you learned on the old path. Yeah, last one.
Have you ever faced some real skepticism or opposition in these sort of changing your path or reinventing yourself a little bit? And how did you deal with that?
How did I deal with that? There will always be judgment and criticism, and are you for real? And you can't decide, and you're wishy-washy. You went this way, then you went that way. I think for me, I've come to a point now in my life where that really rolls off my back. And I think it's because of the fact that I spent some time in South Africa with mothers that were raising children in really, really hard circumstances of profound material deprivation. And they were often a single mother living in a shack with 4 children, sleeping on one mattress that took up most of the floor. And what I saw amongst those mothers was something amazing. Here in America, we have so much choice. Are we going to bottle feed or breastfeed? Are we going to use disposable diapers or cloth diapers? What are we going to, glass or plastic, organic or more traditional? And because there's so many choices, we get very insecure, and so we tend to criticize one another, like say, oh, can you imagine what she's feeding him if she lets him do that? And because it makes us feel better about our choices. But I think what I saw in South Africa were a bunch of mothers who didn't have those choices. And you know what they did? They looked each other in the eye and they said, you are doing a wonderful job of raising that child. They supported one another. They realized the value of holding together. And that was for me a lesson that changed everything about the way I saw the decisions other people were making. Because until you have walked in somebody else's shoes, you cannot judge the decisions that they have made or that they're making. So for me, I only really respect the opinions that come from that place of shared commitment to trying to do what's best, given the resources that we have. Anything else, it really doesn't register with me. And I'm sure there are people that say, oh, she's too this or she's too that, but there will always be those people. You just have to feel good about who you are, I think. Okay, do we have 2 more minutes? Can I show you? Actually, I think it's like 4 minutes, yeah? And this is like completely off of topic. I have to say, one of the things I love about this clip that I'm going to show you is that this woman, and we're not going to talk about what happened afterwards because it went a very rocky road afterwards, but this woman, in this moment in her life, loved what she was doing and blew an entire room of people who were judging her, blew them away with her absolute enjoyment of what she was doing. And because of that, I watched this clip, and I'm sure many of you will have seen it, but I'm going to play it anyway. Have you seen it? Who hasn't seen this? Okay, there are a few of you that haven't seen it. For those of you that have seen it, just enjoy.
That's a big town. It's a sort of collection of villages.
And how old are you, Susan?
I am 47. And that's just one side of me.
Okay, what's the dream?
My trying to be a professional singer.
And why hasn't it worked out so far, Susan?
Well, not been given the chance before.